My name is Mariah Sutherland, and we are reporting from Brigham Young University, Idaho. Today, we want to discuss an unnoticed practice happening on the other side of the world, the treatment of women in Afghanistan. This topic stems from the book No Good Men Among the Living by Anand Gopal. In the book, Gopal follows the lives of 3 Afghans, showing us their life during the war. One story that brings this topic to light is the story of Hila, a housewife. We look at the trials that she faced with experiencing and witnessing abuse of women in Afghanistan. In their culture, abuse of women is widely known and accepted, as women are treated as property. The government doesn't bother to fix any of these issues that infect their country. Gopal states this clearly when he says that the new government would no more intervene in such matters than it would if you had, in some private rage, killed your own oxen or damaged your own house. We turn to 2 students at Brigham Young University, Idaho, Katherine Orchard and Spencer Bailey. What are your thoughts on this topic?
In the United States, we're dumbfounded by the fact that women can be treated so poorly. This is a problem in Afghanistan, and it's just wrong that the government wouldn't step in and say something. Up until recently, nobody ever said anything. It was just a part of life.
Exactly. I believe that the treatment of women in Afghanistan is appalling. I agree with Katherine that us as Americans are baffled with the ill treatment of women there. I believe that the Afghan government should no longer ignore this mistreatment and address the issues that permeate the culture throughout the entire country.
When we were first introduced to Hila, she was living in a very liberal part of Afghanistan. Liberal meaning that she had many freedoms and rights that the majority of the female population didn't have. She had these privileges because she married a man, Muskin Yar, who had ties to the communist regime in Afghanistan. However, as life goes on, Muskin Yar's views on women's rights change, and Hila becomes very oppressed. This really brings the subject of women's rights into play. One example that we want to share is when Hila was discussing how women are treated. Hila was talking about how her husband broke her arm because she talked back to him. Women out in the village don't talk back to their husbands. It's just the law. When men say something, women should just listen, and you should never talk in a loud voice because a man outside might hear. I made that mistake, but I was lucky. In Tiran Khat, a man once beat his wife with an axe and she survived, but her head was split open. Husbands who only use their hands or feet are very kind. We are then shown another example that is even more brutal than the first. One of Hila's neighbors was angry after her husband took a second wife. Because of this outburst, the woman was held down by her family and shot. What are your thoughts on this?
Just from this, we see that Hila is living in a more liberal part of the country. We see women who are being beaten with an axe and shot by their families. If this is what it's like in the region where Hila lives, it makes you wonder what it's like in the more conservative part of the country.
Exactly. It really makes you think about what's going on in other parts of the world, but especially in Afghanistan. It's crazy how much we learn about the treatment of women from one woman's story. From Hila alone, we're given quite a few examples of the abuse of women.
We found an article from the UN entitled UN Reports Slow, Uneven Use of Afghan Law Protecting Women. This report talks about the increased reports of women being abused, but still the low number of prosecutions and convictions to the men in the wrong. Women are coming forward and demanding justice. The government needs to step up and provide that justice. The government doesn't do enough to protect the women of Afghanistan. They would rather settle with mediations than go to court to deal with this very serious issue. Without them going to court, women don't get the appropriate representation. They also don't get the right amount of justice brought to them. Mediation is used to settle an issue, but many times one or both parties don't leave with a fair settlement. What we found is that instead the police and prosecutors were mediating more cases of violence against women. Mediation, whether through formal or informal dispute resolution, bodies often fails to protect women from further violence by not applying criminal sanctions and legal protections for women, according to the report. We will now hear from 2 other Brigham Young University, Idaho students, Shelby Wright and Rachel Rue.
Hila basically says that the women are in the wrong when it comes to their injuries inflicted upon them by their husbands. This is a social norm which I cannot begin to fathom. The fact that the UN report sheds light on the abuse and crime against women, and many women come forward demanding justice, shows that this social norm is not acceptable. Change needs to happen, and it needs to begin with protection on the government's part.
Another reason for the ongoing mistreatment of women is due to the Afghan written law. One such law is the Sharia law, which is a way of Islamic life. According to BillionBibles.org, the Sharia law is cast from the actions and words of Muhammad. The law cannot be altered, but it has room for interpretation. Some of the listed rules under the Sharia law regarding women include: a man can beat his wife for insubordination. A divorced wife loses custody of all her children over 6 years of age. And a woman who has been raped cannot testify in court against her rapist. These are just a few of many rules against women.
The United States Institute of Peace published an article titled Sharia and Women's Rights in Afghanistan. It explains a little more about why the Afghanistan government is failing to protect their women. One interesting fact is that their constitution promises equal rights between women and men. The main reason as to why their government is failing is because they let the Sharia law overpower their constitution. The constitution states that no law will violate the religious laws and thus provide more power to the Sharia law. Legal authorities are usually men and tend to favor the Sharia law, which creates a tougher situation for the woman.
We had the wonderful opportunity to speak with someone who served in Afghanistan. Sergeant Jacob Gould served 2 tours of duty and has seen the abuse and mistreatment of women there. Sergeant Jacob Gould is going to be voiced by Spencer Bailey. To start off, what did you see in terms of the mistreatment of women and the rights that they have?
In short, women do not have any rights over there. Nothing compared to what they have here. Now, there are 2 areas in Afghanistan, and it was the same in Iraq. There are the green areas, where the U.S. and the UN were, and for the most part were a safe zone. In Afghanistan, there's a small area, only really Kabul, the capital, and Kandahar, although I'm not sure how much longer Kandahar will be safe. In these areas, it's safe enough and kind of a democratic state where people enjoy the freedoms of religion and how they want to express themselves, such as women being free to wear what we call regular clothes or other things like go to school.
Thank you. What did you see of the husband and wife interaction? What was it?
It comes back to women. I feel they're just objects like at a store to buy, like a rag doll. Men can also have more than one wife, and many we met had wives aging between 14 to 50 years old. With husband and wife interactions, it was definitely degrading. Like I've pointed out, women are not equal even in the home, and sometimes are not allowed to even talk to the man unless he allows it, let alone how often and how they go outside of the home.
Were the women you saw abused?
Yes, they are abused and oppressed.
How did they seem oppressed?
To put this simply, with women, in my opinion, they are nothing more than an object that you can buy, sell, trade, etc., and it's not pretty.
One last question before we go. Did you feel like you should have done something about it?
Of course, we wanted to do something about it, but we couldn't because then we'd get in trouble. Even just offering women any kind of help because it's international relationships.
Do you have any other comments you would like to make?
The last story was from a verge of attacks that started happening in the first 3 or so months we were there. They would use their women and female children as shields to protect themselves from our fire because they knew we wouldn't attack, or so they thought, when they attacked us.
Thank you, Sergeant Gould. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about what you saw when you were serving in Afghanistan. In conclusion, we see that women in Afghanistan are abused and mistreated by men in the community, whether it's by their husbands or others. This is mostly caused by the Afghan culture. Although this is a widespread problem throughout Afghanistan, we see that there is little being done by the government and other nations to stop these issues and protect the rights of women. This is Mariah Sutherland reporting from Brigham Young University, Idaho.